Hello and welcome to Nevada on the Air. I'm very pleased to have a guest of mine I've known for many years. Congresswoman Dina Titus is here. She served well in the Nevada State Legislature, and now she's the senior representative for us in the United States Congress. She's in her 7th term in Congress. Hard to believe.
I know.
Time flies when you're having fun, I guess.
That's right.
So welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always good to see you, Mitch.
Same here. So we've got so many issues to talk about, and you serve on some really important committees. I think they're interesting committees, actually. The Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and then the Subcommittee on Aviation. If I was ever in Congress, I would want to serve on that one because I think it's a fascinating topic, particularly if you're looking at Read International, what's going on with our visitor counts and so forth. You have to keep track of all that FAA reauthorization. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in that area.
Well, I chose that committee, transportation infrastructure. That doesn't sound very sexy, but it has a lot to do with Las Vegas and Southern Nevada because we import everything, people, flowers, lobsters, we don't make them here. And so getting people here and then moving them around is very important. And as you said, the airport is critical to our economy. I've noticed that just last month we had the 3rd highest record since COVID, so that's good. It's coming back. But yeah, it's a developing field because not only in this area alone, you've got the Air Force, you've got commercial airplanes, you got private jets. We're going to have more and more of those with the race and the Super Bowl and all those kinds of events. You've got drones now. And so, it's a crowded airspace. So it's interesting, and technology is making planes more sustainable, more efficient. What do we do with drones? How do you control the airspace? It is fascinating, and it's important.
I'm one of the few people that actually still likes flying and likes being in airports. But, we had a major airline just get fined for keeping people too long on the tarmac, a $4.1 million fine, I believe it was American Airlines.
It's pretty heavy.
Is there anything that you folks can do about that? Because if you go into some of these and you sit in coach, it's crowded. Sometimes you're held, you're delayed. Are you folks looking into that?
FAA has that authority, and more they're exercising it because you're right. It's not healthy. You sit out there, you're crowded, you're hot. There's not a lot of bathroom facilities. You don't have anything to eat. Maybe you're old, maybe you're a baby, everything in between. So you're only allowed to sit a certain amount of time before you get fined. In the past, those fines didn't seem to be enough to make much difference. But when you get to $4 million, then the airlines start paying attention. And also it's a major airline, so that is the compounding effect.
Let's talk about another issue, and that is you and I have been around long enough. We remember Mayor Bill Breer and the bullet train,
yes,
right? And
yes.
It looks like a high-speed rail is a possibility. Tell us about this exciting news.
I think so, but can I say one thing before we go to trains?
Absolutely.
Another thing I'm working on for airplanes is for the disabled, because they just throw the wheelchairs in the bin underneath with luggage and stuff. They often come out beat up and the person's left without any mobility, and you can't get a wheelchair in the bathroom. So we're trying to make it more accommodating for all travelers. So I think that's an important aspect too that we need to keep a watch on.
Something else along those lines. I read something, I think it was USA Today, where there's actually people that masquerade as the disabled to get on planes sooner than the rest of us. And you see them, walking off or whatever.
That's right.
It's amazing what people try to get away with.
Oh, it's terrible. I fly Southwest a lot, and you see a lot of people do that early boarding, and especially coming to Las Vegas, they're kind of cripping on back at the other end. They get here, boy, they take off and start playing those slots. I say that they're just kind of mentally or ethically, morally disabled.
Definitely ethically challenged.
But now I'm sorry to get us off track. I'll go back to the train. Yes, I'm very excited about the train. Bob Miller originally put me on the Speed Train Commission for the state, working with California. And then Kenny Gwynn, a Republican, kept me on there. And then Gibbons he didn't pay attention to it, so I stayed on there under him. But I think finally it's really coming to fruition. We've got the environmental studies done. The right-of-way is pretty easy because it's going right down I-15. Easy, relatively easy. And the money is coming through. Now it's trying to get a federal grant to supplement public-private. But Brightline is the company that I think is going to make it happen.
Now, is Secretary Pete sort of the person, controls the purse strings on this?
Well, I called him. Yeah, he has a lot to do with it. And the argument I made was to take that federal speed train money and don't do a little dab here, a little dab there, a little dab there. Make a real investment so it can be successful and become a model for speed trains in other parts of the country. You know, they tend to put railroad money in the east, especially the Northeast corridor, but we need some of that in the west as well.
Because that I-15, that could be a mess for folks. I mean, I looked at Caltrans. They're looking, I think, to expanding a lane on certain days and times or whatever. Even they recognize that it's bad for people coming home. It seems like it's so needed.
Oh, depending on what day of the week you're going, it's almost a parking lot. You know, it's stop and go. And so that's not good for convenience, so it's not good for the economy, but it's also not good for air pollution. You know, the transportation is the biggest cause for air quality degradation of any source. So you get all those cars off the road with people riding the train. That'll make a difference for air quality.
You know, another issue that you've been involved in, I'm sort of skipping around, but you kind of cover a wide area, and that's the sports betting issue, where you went to the NFL and you said, hey, you know, what is going on here with these people that are betting and shouldn't be betting? They respond back to you and they say, well, I think we should look at illegal betting.
Right.
That wasn't quite the response you were looking for.
No, it was not. You know, the reason I got into this is because sports betting now is all over the country. You know, it used to be limited, but once they lifted that restriction through the courts and legally, then it's spread everywhere. So there's more sports betting. We're having more sports events in Las Vegas. You know, we're now a sporting town. So that's the second factor. And the third is there's more news about the scandals. You saw Iowa, University of Iowa. You've seen some NFL players go back to Pete Rose. So now that's increasing. I thought, you know, we need to get ahead of this. We better look at it. So I sent a letter to all the leagues and the NCAA asking them, what's your policy? What do you restrict? How do you educate your players and the team, managers, coaches, everybody, about that policy? And then what do you do if somebody violates it? So I don't want to see federal regulation, but they need to get a handle on this themselves. If they don't, then that's going to be the next step. Like the baseball folks came by to see me, NCAA came by to see me, a lot of good response, except for the NFL.
Interesting.
So we're going to keep on them.
Yeah. Going on to another topic, you see these stories where people go into retail, shopping malls even, and big box stores or whatever, and they just take stuff right out of the store. You actually were, I believe, in a Walgreens, and you actually witnessed it firsthand. Tell us about that story, and how big an issue is this?
Oh, it's a huge issue and growing. You see it on TV all the time. But I was in Walgreens at the cosmetic counter, closest me to you. And this person came in with a backpack, went to the eyelashes. You know, the eyelashes are in style now, and just scraped all the eyelashes off the racks into that backpack, walked right out past the cashier. And I was just standing there kind of in shock. I said up to the lady cashier, I said, did you see that person just steal all those eyelashes? And she said, yes, I did. He comes in here pretty often, but management says do not engage him. It's too dangerous. We are concerned about the safety of our workers and other customers. So then that grew, and a lot of the big box stores, including the hardware stores, say people just come roll right out with power tools. And you've seen on TV some of this smash and grab. I think Nordstrom's was a victim of it, grab expensive handbags. And so I have a bill, a couple of other members of the delegation have signed on to it, to make it a federal crime to do these retail, organized retail theft.
Do the stores like Home Depot and others say either it's too dangerous or too expensive to have extra security there? I mean, what can we do before this bill is passed?
Well, they do have extra security, and they do have training of people who work there of what to do or how not to engage. But what you're seeing is more things behind locked gates. If you go into the hardware store, that power saw now will be behind a gate and you have to get somebody to come and unlock it for you. Same thing for cosmetics in a drugstore. They're all behind locked cases. So they've had to go to the expense of locking things up. Plus, now you got to stand around, wait for somebody to come, unlock it for you. And the customer gets kind of irritated. And I guess that leads to more online sales as opposed to going shopping.
Yeah. You're perhaps, in my opinion, one of the more environmentally conscious people in Congress, perhaps more so than anybody else in Nevada. And water is such a focus here because we had all this rain, and then people are sort of lulled into this notion that, well, Lake Mead has got, 3 more feet or 4 more feet, and we're out of the woods. We're not out of the woods, are we?
No, we sure aren't, Mitch. You're right about that. We had a good snowfall, so that was good for the Colorado River. And we've had a rainy August, but lull is the right word. People think, well, that's kind of solved the problem. The drought is over. It's a 1,200-year drought, and it is not over. Just go out there and look at the bathtub rings around the lake. So we still have to do things for conservation. And we've done a good job. The plumbing fixtures, for example, in new houses, restrictions on water in the lawn, restrictions on size of swimming pools, use of gray water for golf courses. We passed a lot of funding in some of the recovery bills and in the Inflation Reduction Act to do conservation issues along the river so you don't lose as much water from the pipe to the tap. There's going to be a water sharing bill that finances some storage and recycling with California and Nevada. All of that's good, but that doesn't take the place of rain.
Yeah, I was thinking about Arizona. I read somewhere where they were going to take draconian measures to either reduce development or put a stop on an embargo and whatever. And I thought, well, we've got some measures here. At least we can brag about some things with the return flow credits and things that we've had in place for almost decades, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
That puts us in a pretty good position in the short term.
That's right. But we got to think outside the box. Arizona, for example, is growing cotton in the desert. That makes no sense. Israel has this drip irrigation. We should be looking at things like that. We grow alfalfa that was shipped to China. Is that a good use of our water and our land space? So we need to be creative. But you're right, Phoenix, one of the suburbs of Phoenix, has put a cap on growth. Now, there's been a reluctance to limit growth at all in southern Nevada, but it's going to have to be balanced with water availability.
You serve on a very important committee, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, and an issue that is in and out of the headlines depending on who's speaking in Congress. Do they support Ukraine? Do they not? We should stop all funding. It's not our war. Do we have a moral responsibility? And of course, it seems like there's a growing chorus on the other side of the aisle, the Republican side of the aisle, to go ahead and curtail that or stop that. Where do you fall out on that?
Yeah, you're right. And, the kind of Freedom Caucus, Boebert and Taylor Greene and some of that crowd think we shouldn't be spending more money there. I'm not in that position. I think you have to support Ukraine because they're on the front line stopping Russian aggression to try to restore the old Soviet Union. And if they take Ukraine, then next will be Poland and Hungary and the Baltics. They're on the move. So it's kind of a surrogate war for democracy. And remember, Ukraine has great relations with NATO, but it's not a NATO country. But you go beyond that, and those other countries are part of NATO, which means we are obligated under Article 5 to send troops. Now, had you rather send money, or do you want to send money and our men and women to have to fight? And I don't want to do that.
It's kind of like they think that Putin has changed, or, it's almost like they come right out and say that, he's a great leader and he's done good things for his country and he needs to go ahead and we need to give him the land that he's already taken. Yeah. This is the Republic. It's kind of strange.
Well, it is. At Crimea, they just want to write off Crimea. But Trump, Trump had a great relationship with him. He likes that strong man like North Korea and Saudi Arabia. So it's kind of washed over. I think Putin is very evil and very dangerous. And I don't see him as somebody. Look what just happened to the head of the Wagner troops who went down in the airplane. I don't know anybody who doesn't suspect that Putin had a hand in that, because he led kind of a semi-revolt against Putin not long ago.
Exactly. I keep saying one last question. I think of something else. There is one last question, and that
we have good conversations.
We do have a good conversation, and that is Congress itself. There's a lot of people that are saying, and then again, as we're recording this, Congress is still open. It's in recess. They're going to go back to business in September after Labor Day. But could Congress shut down? Is it possible that the government just grinds to a halt? Mm-hmm. And why is that?
Well, don't call it recess, because I'm busier than ever while I'm home in the district, as you know. But yeah, we're out. We go back after Labor Day. And then you have to the end of September to fund Congress for the next fiscal year. And there is no agreement on the budget, or on the appropriations. These appropriations bills haven't been passed. So what will likely happen is that they'll do a continuing resolution, which means you'll keep funding government the way it's funded this year until probably the end of the year, hopefully come to some agreement during that time. But when you talk about the Chip Roys and the Boberts and all those people, there's no guarantee that they will agree even to a continuing resolution. And so there's a likelihood it'll shut down, but I think that would be terrible politically for both sides. But it would also be terrible because you shut down, you start up, you lose time. And veterans checks, Social Security checks, Medicare checks, all of that will be stopped. And people just can't afford to have that happen.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Same here. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.